my people here.
Willie P wanted to make their presence known, so hot.
You can tell this is a friendly crowd. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mary Hancock, President of Edison State University. For those who don't know me, I feel like I see a lot of friends in the room, obviously, Thomas Edison folks, but also around. And we have some overflow rooms. We have about 250 people between live and virtual for this event. And I think that shows a real hunger to learn about pathways, to learn about journeys. This discussion, I think, came around a conversation between Kellie and Marcela saying, it's Women's History Month. Let's do something, let's show pathways. And as it came together, like a lot of things do, it looks like it was really well planned, not that it wasn't. But as you look at the panelists, as you look at the people who will be speaking, each one has a very different journey. And I wish today, I'm very disappointed that our moderator, Janine Frisbee-LaRue, will not be here. I want to pass on her sincere regrets. As you may or may not be aware, the Frisbee-LaRue family lost a family member this week, and she needs to deal with that, I think we all agree. But she is yet another person that has taken a really amazing journey to be a lead and an advocate for women, for minorities, and for whole government services. She's been an educator, she's been a lobbyist, she's been with the administration, she's done some of everything, and she's done them all. If you know Janine, she's done them all with Janine's style, which says a lot. So we're glad she's with family today, but we do. She sends her regards and wishes she could be here. I also want to give a nod out because since it's the Government Affairs and Community Affairs panel, we lost another leader yesterday. And I did not know Senator Rice well, but everyone you speak to said nobody spoke from the heart and with more passion and conviction than Senator Rice. So it's a period of transition. One thing, we had Kean here for Martin Luther King Day. She gave some great remarks, and one remark she said at the very end, and I say I was watching virtually, kind of living a COVID dream, but one thing she said that was so good, at the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home. And then kind of today when I talked to her, I thought, you know what, Janine, tell me what you need, because at the end of the day, we're all walking each other home, we're all here for each other. And I hope that's what you get out of this panel. In 1980, President Carter created the Week of Women's History. 7 years later, it became a month. I think we've come a long way. The Pew Research did a recent study showing women earn 82 cents on the dollar for their male counterparts. Since this is an academic community, I have to say that's trying to creep your way out of a B-. That's not that cool. I gotta say, that's not that cool. We know there are a lot of things that go into it. We know there's policy and culture changes that have to happen, that have to better integrate. I think we saw this, and some of us really, I think, rose to a height during COVID of matching work-life balance, of finding pathways to make sure everybody succeeds in today's environment, professional and personal, at an equal rate. So yes, we're moving up. Yes, we've got more work to do. And the journey continues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panel. Marcela is stepping in as moderator for today's panel. But I do want to say there's so many pathways, there's so many doors, and we all cheerlead each other's growth. But I do hope for the folks in this room that you take advantage, not just with the panel, but everybody else. I see leaders in community affairs and government affairs throughout this room. Let me ask people, what journey did you take? What did you do? How did you get there? There are no clear paths. I think what you will find from every woman sitting up here is there are no clear paths. But help somebody open a door, help somebody think of a door they may not consider, and be creative in your own doors. So I leave with that challenge, and Marcela, I to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Hancock. And first of all, I just want to say good morning. Thank you all for making it here. I'm so glad that the wind died down for today and that you all weren't being blown away. I would really like to start with a brief moment of silence for Senator Rice. I worked with him in the Senate Majority Office for many years, and he was always an inspiration, knowing how much conviction he had for the state of New Jersey, for the African American community and just in general for a fight for equity, I would like to just hold a brief moment of silence for Senator Rice. Thank you, everyone. Again, good morning. My name is Marcela Maziarz. I am the Vice President for Community and Government Affairs here at Thomas Edison State University. We are so happy to host this wonderful panel of women. This really was an idea that came from Kellie. We were talking and we're like, you know, we have a fabulous group. We have all of these meetings under Najaski, who represents the senior state universities. And we have great government events that our director, Jean Lepore, puts together. And as I sit and I see these women, I'm like, you know, this is the perfect opportunity. And Kellie said, bring us together. Let's have a discussion. And we wanted to keep it very friendly. The idea here is really to see how our different backgrounds have brought us to public service to the state of New Jersey, to service in universities that all have different missions, but are fulfilling those missions and moving the state forward, be it in an innovative way, in an equitable way, in an access service for those that thought, I'm never going to college, but we're giving them the tools in our institutions to reach a higher potential. So let's start with introductions. Kellie.
Kellie Drakeford, LeDet. I'm the Chief Government Affairs Officer and Special Assistant to the President at Kean University. Hi, Kean.
Good morning, everyone. Angela Garretson. I am the Chief External Affairs Officer at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, better known NJIT, and I'm really excited to be on this panel today. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Jennifer Keyes-Maloney. I am the Associate Vice President for Government and Community Relations, as well as Partnerships at the College of New Jersey, and super excited to be part of today's event.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shantè Palmer. I'm Vice Chancellor for External and Governmental Relations at Rutgers University, Newark.
Can you all hear us okay? Okay, excellent. A little low? Okay. Maybe we could raise the volume a little bit. Okay, perfect. So let's now go in reverse order. Why don't you tell us where you were born, where you grew up, and you know, anything interesting about your start, how you got to government.
Sure. So thank you, first and foremost. It's always an absolute pleasure to be around all of you, my fabulous colleagues I've known for a very long time. So as mentioned, I'm Shantè Palmer. I was born in Montclair, New Jersey, and grew up in Montclair. And I am one of 7 in a very large family. I'm a mother. I got my start, well, we're not talking about the start in government relations, just me in general. So yeah. I grew up in New Jersey, and I was a young mom. I started my college and my working career very young because of that. And we'll go more into that when we talk about the government relations piece. But I studied in New Jersey. I started at Essex County College, a community college, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to major in and what I wanted to do. And then went on to work to study at Montclair State University, and then on to Rutgers, Newark, to get my master's. And through all of that, I was a non-traditional student. I went to school completely at night, and I stayed very local. And I'll leave it there because I don't want to spend too much time. I want to make sure everyone else get their story. But it's me, my beginnings in a nutshell.
So my story kind of takes you halfway across the United States and back again. Born in New Jersey, is Riverside Hospital? Mountainside Hospital, forgive me.
Mountainside, yep.
Mountainside Hospital. My dad, now deceased, was a Methodist minister, and part of his job with the denomination was to help churches that were struggling. It could be interpersonal, it could be a whole host of different issues. And so we had parishes in a bunch of different places. The most colorful was probably Iowa. So we went from Basking Ridge area, where he did youth ministry, to, from there, Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, right on the New York border, Binghamton area, middle of freaking nowhere, but not as much nowhere as in the future. Then on to Cincinnati, Ohio, which I really loved as a kid. And then we went to Iowa, right on the Minnesota border. So that literally was the middle of nowhere. I was privileged enough to be able to come back to the East for high school and college, and that's how I ended up actually at the College of New Jersey, as I was considering in terms of, you know, college, what options were out there. There's 4 kids in my family. Parsons don't tend to make a whole lot. My mom's a school teacher. And so in some respects, College of New Jersey was that perfect price point. And it gave me access and opportunities in the Trenton metropolitan area that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. I will say this, kind of an homage to the future conversation. Part of what I learned about politics, I learned at my dad's side, in some respects, navigating a church congregation and all their needs and wants and wishes, including some weird ones, I'm just going to leave it at that, are really good experiences to be able to navigate kind of the ability to communicate and connect with people. I think the other benefit of living all those different places is that I also learned to communicate, differently depending on where I was. Before I went to law school, I actually worked in business for a number of years. And I will just say this, when I'm in the Midwest, I don't tend to be as caffeinated as I am this morning. The pace of my speech must slow down or they look at you like you're just crazy or shyster. So, but really happy to be here and happy to share my experiences with all these things.
Thank you.
So, good morning. Thank you again. So, my journey really started with growing up with matriarchs. So, my grandmother, my mother, I was raised in a single-family household, and I really am so proud of that because my mother worked 2 jobs to make sure that I became a lifer, and I was a prep school kid. So, from 1st to 12th grade, I start my journey from my 1st grade experience at Montclair Kimberly Academy. So, I have some Montclair roots. And it was just such an incredible experience for all those 12 years. But my grandmother also was a domestic worker, and so I got to see the other balance of it. And my grandmother really taught me so much about working with so many diverse people, and that at the end of the day, you can have families that doesn't have to be only biological. So with that, I was able to be raised in an environment in Hillside, New Jersey, which I'm very proud of. So I'm a Union County girl. And through that, I was able to see the haves and have-nots, because I had to take a bus from Hillside to Montclair, woke up at 6 o'clock every day since I was in first, or no, that was like a little bit later, but from those early years. And today, I still wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, so those things really were ingrained in me. But it was just early on in those journeys from driving or taking a bus and seeing what communities look like from Hillside all the way to Montclair, and being the first on the bus and seeing the first off the bus, right? So I would see a lot of people and what houses and homes and communities look like at an early age. And I didn't understand it then, but it really helped mold and really helped me understand what it meant to really be very valued when you think about education. So I really was ingrained from my parents, my mother, my grandmother. Again, in that single family household, I really got to understand the importance and significance. So I'll leave it there because there's so much more to talk about, but that was really my early inspirations, and it has carried and stayed with me through all of my work, including my government relations.
Thank you. Thank you, Angela. So first I want to thank President Hancock for having us, and it's Women's History Month, but I do want to give the men a shout out for supporting us, so let me give them a round of applause. Give them a show out. So I think my life is if the story, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. Nothing was planned even from the day I was born. It was a blizzard, Friday the 13th. My parents were going to Riverview Hospital, couldn't get to Riverview Hospital, and had to go to Fort Monmouth. So I was able to get all the benefits of being an Army brat, and though neither of my parents served in the military. Like Angela, my grandmother was a driving force in my life, and I'll get to that. Like Shantè, a young mother. In my mind, I was going to go away to college and never come home because I was in a strict household. In my mind, I remember coming home one day and my mother said, "Great, you got accepted to Norfolk State University, which is a HBCU." gold, green, and gold. And I said, I never applied to Norfolk State University, so how did I get accepted? And my brother at the time was a student government president. He was the boss of the Omegas. And I said, here we go again with her and David's plans. And so I didn't land at Spelman. I landed at Norfolk State University. And again, things didn't go as planned. Had twins my junior year. And unfortunately had them when I was 5.5 months pregnant. And blessed that one is still here with me today. The one that they said that was not going to live past 24 hours is 36 years old with twins of his own. And my story, and my kids asked me, I actually have two, Lauren and Michael. Lauren thinks like she doesn't exist, but she's all over the place. She's me all over again, God help us. And, but my story is that failure was not an option. And so as we get into how we got into government and things like that, failure simply was not an option. And we'll talk about our journeys. And I'm happy about my journey and where God has placed me, because He uniquely placed me and the people that He surrounded me with. And so I'll stop there.
Thank you all for that. And I just have to say that we probably sitting here, all of us have over 80 years of experience in state government and in federal government for some of you. I personally was born and raised in Cali, Colombia. I moved here when I was 19 years old to finish college. Finished up at as a student worker as well, and mostly going at night to Rutgers to study political science. And you know, by chance, I ended up meeting folks where at the hotel that I worked while I was paying my way through college that said, hey, you're graduating with a political science degree? Why don't you give us some of your writing samples? And that was my first job with an assemblywoman many, many years ago. Unfortunately, she has passed, but she was a great mentor. Her name was Arlene Frisha. She gave me my first job in Middlesex County state government right after I graduated college. But I hear you with your journeys. I came from a different country. Fortunately, I knew the language, so it wasn't as hard. But you're still an immigrant. Mm-hmm. And you learn very quickly that the color of your skin, your slight accent, you get the questions, you get the microaggressions, and you're a woman. So we'll get a little bit into that, but that's a little bit of my story. So why don't we go back and talk a little bit about how you got to where your first jobs, where you went to college, your experience in college.
Sure. So I actually, when I began college at Essex County College, that's where I actually began working as well. So I went to the Career Services Department because, as I said, I was a young mom. And I said, you know what, I have to work. I have to find out how I can utilize both going to school, educating myself, and also working to take care of the new family. And within a year of my studies, I ended up in the career department and received an internship at the National Labor Relations Board. And that was the beginning of my 17-year career in government relations. So I worked at the National Labor Relations Board for 7 years, from a floor secretary up to the regional attorney's secretary. I did a paralegal studies at Essex County. Was hired full-time after my first, I believe, 6 months there, and ended up in the compliance department, where I worked with lawyers on employer and union issues for about 7 years. I continued my studies. I finished Essex County, and I went on to Montclair State to study political science. It was really important that I continued my studies, and then on to Montclair State. And after 7 years, I had to make a decision on whether I wanted to go to grad school or to law school or what I wanted to do next. So I decided to have conversations with my colleagues and my peers and my friends, because, you know, speaking to my mom and speaking to my family, the National Labor Relations is a good job, do not leave. I would still be there today if I listened to that advice. But I wanted to challenge my experience with community. And yes, I was working for a federal agency, but I wanted on-the-ground experience, and I wanted to connect to the people who look like me and to open doors. So I got a recommendation that Senator Lautenberg, the late great Senator Frank Lautenberg, was hiring, and I transitioned from the National Labor Relations Board into I think, project specialist for the late senator. And what was interesting is that my exact fear came true. My mom was like, well, he is 89, and what is your plan for, in the event that he retires? And I was like, you know what, I'll take it one day at a time. So within my, I think, first year, he did pass. And my mom, I told you, don't leave that good job. But things worked out because I transitioned to Senator Keyes-Maloney, who was the interim senator, and then on to Senator Cory Booker, where I served for about 3.5 years, focusing on housing, education, small business, the equity issues that I cared most about. I was now in a position through the senator's office to connect directly to communities. That's where I learned about higher education and the differences that our K-12 institutions throughout the state of New Jersey face, and what I describe as the 3 pillars of our society: housing, education, and our economic development and the reach in our small business communities. So I got to delve into all of those issues throughout the state, and I'll quickly finish by saying after Senator Booker's office, I went on to work for Capital Impact Group, which is a lobbying group. That was my first foray into private work. And I was the vice president of business development for that firm across the street here. Mm-hmm. And that was also eye-opening because I was able to work with corporations and see the other side of connecting them to community and to the communities in which they're housed to do great equity work. From then, I went on, I got a call from Montclair State that the government relations position was open, and I applied and went on into higher education. Thus, you see me here. I worked for Montclair State for about 3 years before transitioning to become the Vice Chancellor of Government Relations at Rutgers. So that's my quick story, but I say all of that to say the most important part was that I not only utilized my mentors and my colleagues and my peers to figure out and to navigate what was not only available to me, but what made sense for me in my career at the time, but I was guided by my passions and my purpose versus what society or my parents or what life said was the right next step. I just followed my, the opportunities that presented itself, but also was grounded in my passions, and that was to help others and to open doors. So I'll leave it there.
So for me, public service was always part of my life, in part because of my dad's work. But college, in particular, as I realize, I dropped the end of sentences, guys, so you hear the beginning and not the end. I had that critique a couple times before the state board. Anyways, college itself was really an opportunity to break out. One of the things that my parents kind of had that expectation that I would go to a religious school. I didn't necessarily want to do that. And, the reality is that the economics were such that it made sense to go to an in-state school. The college offered a great package, and it had the major that I wanted, and it gave me an opportunity in many respects to do internships in the capital area. And so, that college experience also taught me that I had to hustle. What I learned as much in outside the classroom experiences were kind of important. I remember I had 2 jobs at one point. One was cleaning my own office. It made me very tidy, I will say, which is very good. Hole punches are evil things. But it also grounded me in that there is no task that's, and I had already known this, but it kind of reinforced there is no task that is beneath you or above you. You can rise to the occasion and you can make it work no matter what. My mom, a couple years ago, gave me a dragonfly, and in some respects it's become my own personal sigil, in that dragonflies are one of the few insects on the planet that can actually fly forward, backward, and sideways. And in some respects, my career path took me that way. So after college, I had planned to actually work for state government. Unfortunately, there was a contraction in state government, and so I was like, okay, well, what can I do? I ended up working for a direct-to-consumer firm. So yes, I did marketing directly to you guys, those mailers you got. I might have been partially responsible. That was at the time of big data really becoming something, which was kind of interesting. And fast forward, when I get to law school, I realized how challenged that was in some respects. But we had all this information about people. Think of your Price Plus card. Yes, I go to ShopRite, but the Price Plus card and what we know about when you go shopping and what you buy. Well, those basic, simple coupons you get at the register, imagine being able to move that beyond just what happens at the register. That's what was happening. We were doing that with car companies, pharma companies, internet companies. And so it was exciting, but it was also much more information than looking at it now. Do I feel comfortable? We were connecting data sets and saying, okay, well, we have a profile of a person that we can then market to, right? Trying to explain that when I did transition to government after was sort of interesting, because I had to explain, the direct mail you got that's really kind of personalized to you, I might have worked on some of that. It's a little creepy, but it was interesting work. During those years, my sisters actually lived with me. They also went to the college in New Jersey, and so it was a good chance to kind of also see them grow up. That was one of the expectations that my parents kind of had. It was funny. Once they realized that it was going to be okay sending their kids to a public university, they're like, yeah, go forth and prosper. It's a lot cheaper there. And so actually my sisters went to the college in New Jersey. My brother, who refused to go to the college in New Jersey, went to Rutgers. So needless to say, I took a little bit of pause. I took graduate courses along the way during those years, but with my sisters in school and working to support them, the idea was to kind of focus on my career, which I did. It took me all over the country. We moved a company actually back from Chicago to the East Coast to do some of those direct-to-consumer campaigns. I realized at a certain point I lived out of my suitcase an awful lot, and I didn't know if I really wanted to continue that life. And so my sisters graduate. They're on their way. They're still living with me because the one decided to go to graduate school, which is fine. But I really had wanted to go to law school, and so it gave me the opportunity, now that they were, kind of launched, to embark on that journey. I went at night, worked during the day, probably the best choice that I could have ever made, because it really required you to balance, like I had in some respects in undergraduate, really the idea of the work life and the academic life, and I knew so much more about life because of the work that I was doing. I remember second to last semester in law school, I had been in a state and local government class, and I'm sitting next to a gentleman who was talking about child sex offenders, and I'm like, that bill will never ever make it to committee, and it will never ever make it out of committee, and it will never ever be heard on the floor, because it was about protecting child sex offenders, because they still deserve some support. Obviously, they're children. But that realistic idea of how the world works, I think, was really important for my journey academically. It also made me, in many respects, more marketable. During law school, I actually worked for the city of Philadelphia doing after-school programs. From there, I went on, interestingly, to the judiciary, which actually I think that's where I met Kellie the first time. Yeah. Where I represented the courts, basically, the administrative office of the courts, for about 5 years. It was a perfect place to be, finishing law school and also kind of embarking on my next step in terms of my academics. And the reason, candidly, I got that job was that I knew a little bit more about the Yankees than I probably did as a child, which was good, because my father was a Mets fan. But, my boss at the time was really into the Yankees. I knew about, obviously, government because of the, academic work that I was doing, but also the fact that I had worked down here as an intern while I was at the college. And those were the sell points for how I ended up getting my first job at the judiciary as the legislative liaison. One of the best bosses that I've ever had, the gentleman's name was Dave Anderson. He kind of gave me the mantra that continued in terms of the lobbying aspects of jobs like this or other work that I did after, which was, it's our job to make a good bill better and a bad bill good. And that is our exercise here, because in some respects, at the judiciary, your focus is very broad. It's everything from tax to municipal fines to family issues, and some of them are very sensitive topics, to criminal law. And we had the conversation around death penalty at the time. Bail reform was just starting to happen while I was there. So it was a really great place to be a generalist. I learned so much from my colleagues. They were there almost as my family. I remember my husband actually had talked to my boss. I had passed the bar. I had my swearing in courtesy of him. He brought my family in. He brought friends and colleagues. And I had my swearing in the Supreme Court courtroom. And all of my colleagues from the AOC were there too. And it really mattered because they were my family in many respects. It's funny, I thought it wouldn't come. But I haven't thought about that story in a long time.
We have tissues.
Yeah.
You were thinking.
But that's maybe what's always grounded me. I have developed families no matter where I've been. Whether it was there or at the Principals Association, because I went from there after I had fully become a legit lawyer, if you will. I'd passed the bar and moved on. I went to the Principals Association, had the privilege of representing principals around the state for about 8 years. I did lobbying for them, but I also did direct representation. There I became more of a specialist, focusing on ed and labor law in many respects. And my experience with school funding, actually, because of the Principals Association and the work around school funding, led me to my opportunity with Treasury. So I was an assistant treasurer under the Murphy administration for about 5 years. Weird portfolio. I worked on tax policy. Yes, I was Darth Vader of tax. I wore black a lot. It's all good. Or the Grim Reaper of tax, depending on how you look at it. But no, I worked on tax policy. I also did revenue systems. Unclaimed property, which was my happiest division. We got to give money to people. And risk management, which was really focused on workers' comp and tort claims because of, obviously, the legal background. But really kind of that trajectory, and then, whether you're talking about this position that I occupy now or that position in Treasury or going back in the time machine, your friends, your colleagues, and it can also be the folks that you work with. Folks at Judiciary, I still go back for their Christmas, holiday, and for the summer picnics. They are still my fam, and I have been blessed along the way because of them.
So I love that, and I want to pick out a couple of things from what you both said of the importance of valuing what you learn at work. Because we all, in this panel, we're talking about the different pathways that we took. Certain to go to college, expected of us. We had that drive to do that. But we know of many individuals that are non-traditional learners. That's the mission here in TSU, to help those that are non-traditional learners convert that learning that they've done in their jobs, in their careers, in the military, into college credits. So many things, right? I graduated from Rutgers with a political science degree. What I learned in my experience in the assembly, the assemblywoman got voted off the ticket, turned parties. You don't learn that in school, no matter how many advanced political science classes you take, right? That is a unique experience, and it really tells you how to navigate now being in a different party, having to go against those that used to be your running mates, the issues of dealing with the constituency calling you for emergency things. Those are all things that we're learned on the job. So why don't you tell us a little bit about something like that for you? I know we heard all about Jennifer's, she's still crying, judiciary journey. I will start crying too if I see my friends from the DOH sitting over here, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But Kellie and Angela, I'm curious to hear a little bit about your experiences.
So I think I'll go to Norfolk State and then come back to New Jersey. Let's take a quick turn. So as a poli-sci major, we did canvassing and things and worked on campaigns. And the first campaign I worked on was for Lieutenant Governor Wilder running for governor. And Chuck Robb in Virginia, it's just one term. And interestingly enough, though of the same party, not the same support. And so don't let that be lost on you. Chuck Robb was governor. His lieutenant governor was Doug Wilder, first African-American to be governor for Virginia, and the lack of support, as a college student, we could see it. So around that time is when I was pregnant with the twins, and so Governor Wilder won, and I made a choice to go work for Governor Wilder for about 3 months, and it just didn't work out. I was doing too much, as the kids say now. So I went back home, and my brother was the president of NAACP, and he was also executive director of the Housing Authority. And he said, I want you to be a tech dog. I want you to start things at Housing Authority meetings. And this is what he used to get me to do when we were in college, you know. And he would just do this, and that was the sign, sick 'em, Kelly. And I used to do my research, and my brother just would, I mean, he really, I was his Frankenstein. And so I went to work, you know, we were doing NAACP meetings, and then Congressman Pallone said, I like her. She just comes out of the blue, and you didn't see it coming. And so he was trying to run his brother at that time for mayor, and there was a park in Long Branch, and it was covered by coal. And we tried to get the EPA to come and do an investigation, they wouldn't. And so then I led this march to City Hall, and Frank Pallone, if you could imagine the wizard behind the curtain, was like, yeah, get him, get him, get him. And his brother was not successful, but I was successful in just really galvanizing people to get out and vote. So I started with Congressman Pallone, went on to work for Governor McGreevey in the first term, went back and then went to work for Bob Torricelli on his campaign. And when they offered me a job, and I will say disclaimer, Bob Torricelli is probably the best boss that I've ever had, with the exception of now Dr. Repollet. Did you hear that? But there was the chief of staff that said, what job do you want? And I said, this was after the campaign, and I said, what job are you going to give me? And he said, well, what do you want? Well, what are you going to give me? And my thought was, if you had not thought enough during those 9 months that I was on that campaign that you couldn't give me a job, I don't need to be there. So I said, I'll go back to Pallone and be a big fish in a small pond. So what happened, the New York Times picked up the story, Torricelli refuses to hire African American in a top spot. Went crazy. They kept calling me, and I didn't realize what I was causing. And my mentor, Regina Thomas, was, you have no idea. You are just shaking it from the roof. I had no idea. But I wasn't important enough to be on your Senate staff in a senior position, but I was important enough to put you in the most segregated place every Sunday, and that's a black church. So time went on. I eventually went to work for Senator Torricelli, had a great time working for him, then went back and did Governor McGreevey's second campaign. We won. He was smart enough not to make that mistake because he heard the story. And so I was his deputy chief of management and operations. It was a position that was created, and Jim Davey was the chief of the management and operations. And during that time, I oversaw 6 state agencies, and one of them was the Secretary of State's office. Now, to oversee your mentor, and she's Regina Thomas, 6 feet. We won't talk about weight. She has scared me since the moment I met her in 1996, the Clinton-Gore reelect. But it's love and fear at the same time. And daily, I would go down to her office just to check and see what's going on. At that time, unfortunately, my grandfather had died. My grandparents had been married 59 years, 11 months, and 2 days. My grandmother kept counting. And my grandmother had just gotten a cell phone, and she used to call Regina's number, her main line. And whenever Condoleezza Rice was on TV, my grandma used to call and say, Kellie needs to watch Condoleezza Rice. So one day, we were playing with my grandmother, and she's Nana. She's not grandma, she's too young to be a grandmother. She's Nana. So Regina said, we put her on speaker, and she said, Granny, Condoleezza Rice is a Republican. And my grandmother said, and so am I. And first we did this, and she said, but Kel needs to watch her because one day she's going to the White House. Now, I'm gonna get emotional. And that was in 2003. And she was just, no, Kel, you're going to the White House. And then I remember taking my grandmother to vote in the primary for Barack Obama, and that's what she said. And during that time, Senator Menendez, I was working for him then, fast forward, and he was the chair of Hillary Clinton's campaign. And we had an event at Douglas College. And the reporter went to her, so she was the only older woman, and she said, I'm in the back of the room, and I could see her going to my grandmother, and I was telling my daughter, get to her. And the reporter said to her, why are you here supporting Hillary? She says, I'm not supporting Hillary. I'm supporting Barack Obama. I just want to go to Old Man Rafferty's for lunch. That's why I came. And I'm thinking, and I, to the reporter, please don't print that. She said, oh no. Like, I'm gonna lose my job. And my grandmother said to me, I don't trust this Hillary person, but you're going to the White House, so get ready. And I was able to take her to vote in a primary. Unfortunately, she died of a massive heart attack 2 weeks after the primary. But in 2013, I was running across the White House lawn because I had my husband drop me off at the wrong gate to go for an interview for the president. And when I got there, I went into this room and I heard two people laughing in the other room, and they said, she must really want that job. I didn't know at the time they were talking about me because they could see me running. And the only thing I had in my little clutch purse was a receipt, so I wiped my head with the receipt. Ink all over my head. So they come in and they see me, and it's a nervous laugh, and they're talking, and it was for the SBA, the regional to be the regional administrator for Region 2. And we're laughing, we're joking, and they said, you know what, go on over to the SBA, and we want them to interview. So I had 7 interviews, half hour each, just straight through, and I just couldn't believe it. Like I said, anything that's planned. And I remember thinking, this is great. I did not know, my husband did not tell me, on the way to 4th Street, I had ink on my head, my forehead. So finally, like the 5th interview, this woman, she was the White House liaison, Diana Dukas, and she said, Kellie, is that some kind of sign that you have on your head? What are you talking about? and that was my oh shit moment. And I subsequently got the position, and when I think about it, and a lot of my positions have been first. The first woman, the first African American woman. And again, with the SBA, I was the first African American woman to hold that position, to be the regional administrator for the SBA in Region 2. And it was historic, and I was fortunate enough that my taking the oath coincided with the president coming to New York. So he was there when I took the oath, and it was just amazing. And so I thought about, and why I was positioned when Sandy hit, small business was part of my portfolio with Senator Menendez. So I was up and down the coast helping small businesses get their loans and things like that. It just didn't mean anything to me at the time, just because I thought it's the right thing to do. But you never know who's watching. And the senator saw my passion in that. And I remember when Vice President Biden came in, and this is before I was the regional administrator, and I was with Senator Menendez. And I remember my chief of staff saying, Kellie, make sure you take copious notes because Bob wants to be out front on this. So after we did the walk on Seashore at the boardwalk, and I'm going to say, all these fools went out on the pier to see the roller coaster in the water. Well, if the roller coaster's in the water, why are you on that pier? I was like, you go ahead. Come on. No, you go ahead. You go ahead. And so then the vice president told everyone to leave the room, and I'm sitting there and I'm writing notes. And he said, all reporters leave, it just one staff. So I'm writing, and he said, hey, you, I told you, all reporters leave. And if you ever saw the movie Oliver, where he says, please, sir, can I have some more porridge? I said, please, sir. I'm with Senator Menendez. I'm just taking copious notes. Bob Menendez laughed so hard, and I'm just, and then, Joe Biden just, oh, okay, gives me a hug. I'm shaking throughout. I called my chief of staff and I said, I don't know if I'm fired or not. And he is laughing hysterically. He said, you have to hear Bob say it. He said, it's like, that's where I got it from. He said, it's like the movie Oliver. She said, please, sir. He said, when did she start talking like she's pretty? And so I went and I worked for the SBA. My region was New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I remember thinking every 4 months, I have to go to Puerto Rico. Who says that? Well, someone that does not like to fly says that. And so we would go to Puerto Rico for 1 week. I would go to Puerto Rico for 1 week, and then the following week we'd fly to the 3 islands. So we'd fly to the islands. So to get to the 3 islands, you either took a seaplane or a ferry. I do not like to fly. I do not like water. It was not a happy situation. But I think about it, and I look now and what a blessing it was. But taking off in the water, the seaplane could turn, go through buildings, and I would take the ferry, and there would be this like pole coming out of the water and it said international waters, United States, and the beauty of it all I could see now. But while I was in the moment, all I could think was, get me off of this ferry, countdown 49, 48 minutes, 46 minutes, 47, to get off of the ferry. But to be able to be the ambassador for the President of the United States was just an amazing, amazing time. And my last comment was, I never forget, as we were still rebuilding after Sandy, the president called the regional administrators for Region 2 down to DC. And I remember going into the Eisenhower Executive Office building and I'm thinking, wow. And this admiral walked me over from the SBA, and I'm taking pictures of the carpet that said, I don't think you could do that. I said, it's just the carpet. So we're seated at this table, and there's an administrator for FEMA, the administrator for HSS, which is Jackie Cornell. FEMA was Jerome Hatfield, all New Jersey. Yep. First time ever that, with the exception of one, there was the number of regional administrators that were from New Jersey. And the regional administrator from HUD. So I'm on my phone trying to send my husband the picture of the carpet. And in the front of the room is the ombudsman, Sean Donovan, and Joaquin, I can't remember his last name, Castro, was HUD. And I could hear all this noise, but I'm trying to send him this picture. And I look up, and then the president comes in from the back of the room, and I'm like, and there was about 100 of us in the room, and he walks around shaking everyone's hand, and he sees me and he gives me this great big hug. And I was like, how you doing? And someone was, do you know him like this? Yeah, I know him like that. So I said to my husband, and I don't know if you ever see this meme, I said, well, I was the only African-American woman in the room, so I took advantage of that moment, but it was just, I felt so blessed. And then later they brought us all in, and he said, Kellie, I just want you to know how important rebuilding New York and New Jersey is to this administration, so I want to thank you. And I can't say enough of how I believe that it was really my grandmother's prayers over me, that she kept saying, you're going to the White House, that I lived that moment because of her prayers over me. It was not my plan. I was happy being the deputy chief of staff for management and operations for a governor, for working for a senator, for working for a congressman. Little did I know that that was the plan that he had for me. So in that moment, I was just so blessed, and then eventually it led to me to where I am now at Kean University.
Angela, tell us that fantastic story. Thank you. I like the fact that you were talking to all New Jersey, mostly women in power. I remember my first time coming into the Senate and into the assembly, and you're sitting in caucus rooms and you see a lot of just white males. And you look around, a lot of the staffers didn't look like us, but things are changing. But Angela, let's talk a little bit about your trajectory.
And I hope I don't have tears. But, yeah. But I'm going to start with, I think everything that I've been exposed to or experienced has really started with the quote, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, and we wouldn't know that if we didn't understand what they went through. So even starting at MKA as a young child, and I was 5 black students in a class of about 100 people, you start at an early age learning that I was no different. So I didn't fear being in a room with diverse individuals. I didn't fear like I could not speak up if I needed to, until I got back to Hillside, and I ran for mayor. And there was a woman, Charlotte DiFilippo, who was, at the time, her email was Charlotte at AOL, and I thought it was the coolest thing, because no one was Charlotte at AOL. She was that person, and she had governors and mayors and presidents right in her home, right in Hillside, New Jersey. And I was a rising young elected official at the time. I actually was a school board member. I was working at Eagleton Institute of Politics. I had an opportunity to be a part of what Eagleton really did not know they were prepared for, but a Young Elected Leaders Conference. This was before I ran, so this was around 2003. And I just remember all these young elected leaders from around the world, or the country, who came into New Jersey and lost their minds. Because whenever you're a young elected official, and I'm proof of this, you have to be very refined, and you can't do this, and everybody's watching, and it was during the social media time, so it really exploded, and you were always monitored. But at Eagleton, they were not being monitored, so they broke open the liquor case, and they just went wild. And I just remember James G., who we're all very familiar with. There was a woman who was out of Louisiana. She was a congresswoman, and he just stood his ground and said, "I am not letting anyone disrespect this woman. I am not letting anyone disrespect this woman." And I just remember how he guarded this young elected woman, and I was so impressed. And I was just like, oh my, and I'm not elected at the time, working at Eagleton, running a program called Student Voices. And what we did was we empowered young people. It was a national model out of UPenn. And we wanted young people to have a voice in local elections. It was also during the time of the Cory Booker election that was in Newark, New Jersey. And it inspired me. So it was that next year that I would ultimately run for school board and win, and become a part of Charlotte DiFilippo's world, not necessarily because she won it, but because of the work that I was able to do. In college, I also learned from Eagleton that a lot of women are not always often asked to run for office. So I was immersed with all these amazing studies, as the president from this great institution talked about, the Pew, and Eagleton would do work about women, why we don't run for office, why are we always in the minority, why are we always around the majority of men. So my life has constantly been always around being the only woman, or being amongst a lot of males in these powerful positions. So as I journeyed in my experiences as a young elected official, it would happenstance, as Kellie said, things aren't always planned, but the People for the American Way, that is run by Norman Lear. So if you remember some of those good shows like Good Times and some others, he would create this organization called Young Elected Officials Network, which would take me all around the country now with other young elected officials, including Stacey Abrams, including Kristen Sinema, including Andrew Gillum, who was our leader, who had a rise and fall, including a woman out of Georgia, and all over this country, Melvin Carter, and me. There were all these young elected officials, and we would travel, and we would learn about progressive politics. We would learn about community organizing and take it back to our respective communities. So I was equipped with what I learned in my educational K through 12, and then I was equipped with what I learned in my job working at Eagleton Institute of Politics. And then I would be equipped with what it meant to then take that back into your community and not be afraid, right? Mm-hmm. Because now you're talking to your community, you're really walking with your community during the storm. I remember walking, or rowing, should I say, with the fire department and the police department, because that was the first time I saw people lived paycheck to paycheck in my community and couldn't afford food, right? The storm happened and no one was going anywhere, and people didn't have basic necessities. And this was the first time that they still can't believe I'm in pictures that I'm wading in water, because that was the type of person that I wanted to be. I wanted to be with the folks who were struggling. So with those experiences, I continued on, and I continued on in an environment that was, again, a very male-dominated environment. learning and seeing and having these amazing mentors from Ron Rice and others, Cory Booker. When he was in Newark, I remember I was there educating young people from Newark, from not just the public schools, the private schools, the charter schools, teaching them about civics and political participation. But it also was teaching me, and it was helping me understand who I am as a woman. How do I have a voice? How do I make sure that I am fighting for those who can't fight for themselves? I did it when I was in school, I did it when I was in my community, but most importantly, I did it not because it was for me, but was because I was really learning and gaining from all of the different people who helped me stand on my ancestors. Because I know my grandmother, as a domestic worker, she didn't have a choice. But she was able to help me be able to go to this private school, this elite school that I was one of 5 black kids growing up, and still wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning because of it. But with that being said, so I would take on these different tasks. When I ultimately would continue on, I would become a councilwoman in Hillside, I would become mayor in Hillside, and things I would do there would be untraditional for a lot of folks in my community. I walked and met every single business, every corner, and I had a team to help me do this. And what that gave me was, whether you were a small mom and pop, whether you were what we have today, Gargiulio, a lot of time you'll drive around, you'll see Gargiulio, but those types of businesses, how it started and how it got there. We moved an entire Walgreens to the community, so I really tried to understand the architecture behind business and business development, behind understanding our necessities, our pure necessities, making sure you understand what senior citizens need, what youth need. Because at the end of the day, I ultimately went to Syracuse, and the Eagleton study was right. I was a student government representative, so all the things they said that you would do or how you get there, it actually was me. But most importantly, it was also that I became an elected official at the time, not because I had to do it or someone said, oh, this was a good thing, but because of my MKA days, I was on the board of trustees there. And I saw that I was representing my school, which obviously I love, I still talk about it today. But I also saw that my cousins, who also lived in my household at one point during their growing up years, that they did not have the same education that I received. They did not have the same education. When I was in 7th grade or 8th grade, I'm tutoring my cousins who went through the school system in Hillside. So when I became in a position to be able to represent the people, yes, I would fight for my people, because I knew at a young age, not an old age, at a young age there were differences. I knew that what we talk about today with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, that wasn't something that was just a title for me, it's what I lived. So as I continued in all of the fights and/or all of the advocacy or all of the collaborations and coalition building, I would organize. So my mom would be confused when I organized around the same time that Eagleton had this Young Elected Leaders Conference. We actually brought to Newark, there was a program called the National Hip Hop Political Convention. And my mom would say, you are not hip hop. Like, what are you saying? Like, I don't know what you're doing, but this is not you. But it formulated and it established a lot of great relationships with folks who, you know, I got to see grassroots organizing, and I got to see organizers from all around the country again. So I always had this kind of unique experience of meeting some of the most incredible minds around this country. There was a book that came out then called How to Get Stupid White Men Out of Office. And guess what? A stupid white man got out of office at the time. But I also was able to go to the halls and the doors of the White House, and I was able to be joined by young elected officials all around the country, and I met President Barack Obama, and I was called amongst the team of young elected officials, the young whippersnappers. So almost 20 years later, here I am. I've been elected since 2000, or around the 2003-2004 timeframe. And all of these experiences that I've had working for the legislature, I was able to work for an assemblywoman, I've worked with the congressman, I've worked with the US senator, I've worked with a number of people, too many to number, but most importantly, these folks developed relationships with me. So it wasn't that I was just someone who, we did the work. So we were the ones who were folding the paper over. We were the ones who, when you didn't stuffing the envelopes. We were the ones putting signs on poles at night when you don't see that. And so my work ethic and what I expect of others was always, don't expect someone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. But it doesn't mean everybody's gonna love that, right? Because we actually had to go the hard way. And as we now see government relations and where we all, and all these colorful stories, which I've really enjoyed today, we really recognize that for me, it's been about now transitioning. So I was at Rutgers, I was at Eagleton, I was at the School of Public Affairs. I was there when we did the transition from a department to a school. I was very helpful in creating opportunities because, again, I like getting in places and being a little bit of a quiet fixer. People don't always realize that, but I like to take on issues and make sure that what can I leave behind so that when I'm not there anymore, that someone is better off. So if I was a student when I did my master's and I knew that I was a student at night, but most of my faculty or my professors were not there, I created a mixer. I'd like to create things, so that's kind of been my mantra. So through Mayor, I like to say that I wanted to create more opportunities for police and fire who were diverse to be there. I wanted to create engineering opportunities that people still can't believe that this mind came up with. As I transitioned and became a freeholder, it was something that, again, was a task that several people for 10 years tried to fight because freeholder meant you had to be a man, own land, and not a person of color. And here I am elected as a freeholder, and that doesn't sit well with me. So by the time I ran 3 years later, I would run with 19 black of the 19 black commissioners out of 135 in the state freeholders. And we would create a coalition, another coalition, and not only make sure that we worked with our allies on our boards, because it's not about just being black or a woman, but we brought people together. And next thing we knew, the law was changed. So the governor of this great state was able to not only change the law, but brought us together. We were on the stage with the governor as we transitioned. So I walked into my next term as a commissioner. I ran as a freeholder, the last freeholder of the state, of the country. And then here we are. So government relations at a STEM institution, our mission is polytech. But most importantly, just understanding whether it's Rutgers, TCNJ, or working right here with Thomas Edison and Kean, which is, in the county that I serve. It's more about these relationships, and it's not always about that we have different institutions, because just like commissioners, right? We have all different counties, all different issues, but at the end of the day, we all serve. We all had to deal with COVID at the same time. And as a STEM institution, I'm still one of the only women at the table. It's changing, it's evolving, but in the same token, you're able to lean and stand with your peers that are here today. So that's been a little bit of my journey, the story.
Thank you, Angela.
And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for that. I think that we're kind of getting to time. I really did want to talk a little bit about our experience with COVID and how that has changed really the landscape of work, New Jersey, how we all are thinking about work-life balance, how difficult it was for the individuals that had the service jobs, for those that were in the front lines, those that didn't have the opportunity to sit behind a computer with fast internet in their house, for the children that didn't have a computer in their home or internet access. And I don't think that we're going to get to that today. And I just want to thank all of you for being part of this panel. I think that we might have to have an encore to keep telling some of these great stories. I missed out on, I see some of my colleagues from the Department of Health. I missed out on telling you some of our stories of walking with our blue vests around the city of Trenton trying to get people vaccinated, and the many interesting situations that we found ourselves in and the many friends we made. But I think that we are just seeing from all of you that you have this passion for leadership and for paving the way for other women like us that are mothers, that have different pathways, immigrants, single households, parents that are immigrants. And I think it's just great to see that there are opportunities, and we have such a diaspora and such diversity to just achieve and empower. And we're here to be mentors to anyone that wants to to do the things that we do and be in public service. I want to thank you all for your time. This has been a great conversation. We are going to break and we have some refreshments outside, and then we all have to run over to the State House for a higher education hearing. So I want to thank everyone for being here with us today.